Welcome to the Healing Our Politics podcast, the show that shows you how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. My name is Skippy Mesereau, coach, former elected official, and lifetime public servant. It is my job to sit down with the best thought leaders, coaches, therapists, authors, scientists, and more, and to take the best of what they have learned and translate it specifically for the public service experience. Warning, this is a post-partisan space. No policy, party, or partisanship here because well-being belongs to all of us. This show is about resourcing you and trusting you to make up your own damn mind about what to do with it and what's best for your community. So, as always, with love, here we go. Hello and welcome to the Healing Our Politics podcast, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. In today's episode, I sit down with expert in mindset and mental well-being, Anna Miley. Anna is the lead mindset and mental well-being coach for Locale Learning, an Australian-based company elevating ethical, mindful, and effective leaders, basically people like you. Effectively, Locale Learning is our Australian mirror, doing the work that the Elected Leaders Collective does here in the States on the other side of the globe, equipping local counselors with 21st century skills and mindset they need to succeed in an ever-changing world. Recognized by the Apolitical Foundation as one of just 26 worldwide political well-being trailblazer organizations, they are the leader in political healing on the Australian continent. Locale Learning is the creator of the Political Wellbeing Framework, helping you determine what areas of your life and leadership are most ripe for growth. I highly recommend you check that out. Anna is a graduate of the University of Canberra, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, with degrees in sports science, physiology, and psychology. She's a certified Santosha yoga and yoga therapy instructor, giving me some tongue twisters today, certified neuro-linguistic programming expert, certified hypnotherapist practitioner, and an accredited exercise physiologist. In this episode, we dig into the genetic childhood defect that set her on the path to healing and helping others heal. Her journey to yoga at just 17 and how it can improve your life and service. Building a mental health first aid kit and deploying it when you need it. The criticality of exercise and movement, people-pleasing, and perfectionism. Do these sound familiar to you? And how you can work with them if you have them to own your own experience and receive what you need. Tactical approaches to saying no, very timely. How awareness improves performance. The value and practice of purpose. The science and power of affirmations and how to leverage them to grow in your leadership. And as coaches mutually focused on the political space, we freestyle, opening up the kimono to workshop best practices, learnings, and openly share and brainstorm about what the, quote, right approach is. Spoiler alert, there isn't one. And what's working and not working, and how can we support each other in improving our offerings for individuals like yourselves and your team. It's a true behind-the-scenes view into the uncertainty and iterative nature of improving these support systems that can best serve you. So I hope you enjoy this tactical, practical, personal, and wide-ranging conversation with Anna Miley.
It's just all too hard basket.
It's too hard basket?
Yeah. Like it's literally just like, I don't know.
One of my close friends, Fiona, is Australian, and the amount of lingo that you guys have is insane. I'm going to have to like normally have like a mental health tool. We're going to have like an Australian to English translation dictionary that's going to emerge.
Pull me up if I'm using any.
No, I'm going to pull you into it. I love it. I think it's so good. I adore it. It like just makes me chuckle.
Oh, wow.
But no, you should totally bring it. You should totally bring it.
All right. And I think for me, I am a bit of a person that, as much as I like to be prepared, I'm just better when I'm in flow. And so while I was waiting for you, I was like, okay, don't go and like overthink this. So I just sort of roamed around the office, and which is actually in a bit of a state of a mess at the moment because we have a big community engagement project on. So we've got all of our stuff off to the side there. So I just sort of roamed around in the mess. And
I must be hiding in a corner because you look like you're in a perfectly manicured studio.
yeah, 100%. This little corner and behind my desk, which is actually opposite, we try to keep that game face ready.
So good. It's sort of precisely what I'm excited to talk to you about today, which is you're halfway across the world. In some ways, you are our twin. Like what you're doing in Australia, we are doing in America. And I imagine, like us, people probably look at you like you've got everything figured out and dialed. But it's like we're both kind of building this plane as we go. And I think it's so interesting for me to get to externalize my own experience by getting to know you and where you came from and how you built the program that you have. And then kind of like what's next for us and how are we thinking about it? I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is exciting. And you're 100% right about building the plane as we go. I think for me as well, like the piece of the puzzle that I bring to what we're doing here at Locale Learning is very much, as a wellbeing practitioner with a really quite unique background. It's certainly not a political background at all. Like I have very little experience in working in government and politics. Come from a health background, a corporate health, and also private practice. So I'm really new in the industry, so to speak. But the great thing is it's a human experience. So all of the experience I have and the information that I'm bringing in still really translates into the environment. So I'm excited to share it, and I feel it's so relevant because of the unique type of people that we're working with.
And I'm so curious, and we'll get there later, but how you decided to take what you've learned and then shift your focus into the political realm. And we'll also talk about what is similar or different between the political realms in Australia and the US, and the bridge that kind of brought us together, which indicates that the experiences are similar, is the Mere Mortals report from the Apolitical Foundation, which did this year-round study of the mental well-being of elected officials across the world and its impact on society and on politics and on, citizens' well-being downstream. And from that report, they called out just 26 organizations around the globe that were making a meaningful impact on doing something about that, on delivering services. And so that's you from Australia. I think you and
That's right.
Politics in Color maybe are the two.
Yeah.
So I do come from the political world. My life is the wellness experience. And so I got the experience of having the treatment, so to speak, of like being the client and seeing how it affected me in politics and then being like, oh, this would be so useful for everybody else. And it's really hard to work in this market because it's brand new and no one knows it and no one has time and whatever. So I'm very interested to learn why you decided to take that path then rather than 100 paths that would have probably been easier from a business standpoint.
Sure.
But like, I want to start at the beginning or beginning-ish, which is to say, my journey, my first mental health, I would never have called it that at the time, intervention for myself, as people on this podcast have heard, is when I made my mom take me to Weight Watchers, like a weight loss program in 4th grade. Now, in the little bit I know about you, you get kind of very deep into yoga and particular types of yoga at 17 in high school. And so I wondered, is that your equivalent? What was your first big moment of like, something's going on for me?
I had kind of like a bunch of health problems as a child, and not that that was apparent to anyone else. I was quite a healthy from the outside looking in, beautiful rural upbringing in a beautiful part of the world. I actually grew up in Tasmania, which is the tiny island on the bottom of Australia.
So beautiful.
My parents grew most of our own food and we ate really well. But I just was, lucky enough, I'm going to say, to have some genetic stuff come through. And so by the time I was 17, I was kind of burning out, being a high achieving, go-getting, want to do everything person, but my body sort of wasn't keeping up with that.
Would you be willing to share what it was in particular?
Yeah, well, I'm a unique case. I actually have an interesting blood disorder, which is called spherocytosis.
Huh.
And so my red blood cells are actually spheres instead of circles.
Huh.
Yeah, super interesting. It's really rare.
Wait, can I ask a really weird question?
Yeah, sure.
I live in the mountains, so we think about hemoglobin a lot and the
Yes.
ability to process oxygen. If it's a sphere rather than a plate and you have the same diameter, then presumably there's greater volume. So are you particularly well adapted to cardio and or high mountain environments?
Unfortunately, the opposite. It's a great
Interesting.
question because I had an experience in the Andes and I actually got really sick because of the altitude. Because what happens if I ascend or descend too quickly, basically my blood cells explode. Yeah.
Oh,
so it's a little bit
interesting.
catastrophic actually for me. So it just basically means that I have a slightly compromised immune system. I actually don't have a spleen because the spleen was the primary organ that was destroying my own blood cells because they weren't the right shape. And so the spleen wanted to get rid of them. And so that just meant that my body was working really hard to constantly make new blood cells to replace the ones that it was getting rid of. This is so cool. No one ever asks me this because no one is ever interested.
Huh. No, this is so. So is it like? And I'm sorry, I'm just super curious about this. So is it that the spleen has a filter function?
Absolutely.
It's like trying to put a square peg through a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. And then the body has to replace those. So a lot of your energy is going towards that. Yeah. I imagine that's not something that they test for immediately.
Yeah, well, it was lucky because my dad, well, it wasn't lucky for my dad, but he got quite unwell when I was about 10 and they worked out what it was. And then from there, they thought, oh, maybe this is what Anna has too, or what's going on for Anna. I guess that was a lucky thing. Unfortunate for my dad because he wasn't very well for a while, but he's good now. So yeah, fully functioning, fully engaged, doing life. But the tax of that behind the scenes was probably, a not so great thing for me as a kid who wanted to get in and do everything. It was sort of just that feeling maybe not being able to keep up all the time, which didn't match my natural energy, my natural way of being. So it's been beautiful because I guess I have learned so much from that.
Yeah.
Learned so much about where I put my time and energy, how I use my time and energy, how I perceive myself. And I think I was saying to you in my voicemail to you pre-show, just that not needing to always be 100% on, 100% go, got all the answers, but having that vulnerability to be like, oh, hey, I'm tired, or hey, I need to take a rest, or I'm not 100% today, so I'm just going to have to show up with what I've got, and this is as good as I've got today. So that's kind of been a bit of a theme. Yeah, it was just like year 12, which is our final year of we call it college or high school.
We call it high school, yeah.
So before you maybe go get a job or gap year or uni, I was just like at a point, like I was quite burnt out. I was head prefect. I'd been doing all the things.
Sorry, what's head prefect for those of us on this side of the...
So like a college captain.
Okay.
Like your head leader.
Got it.
Yeah.
In school government?
Yes, that's right. See, I have a political background after all.
Yeah, it's been hiding in plain sight. Turns out you just started when you were 5, like all the rest of us secretly.
And anyway, so I was like, okay, I need to do something. And I'd always been interested in the non-normal, the non-mainstream. I had an interest in alternative medicines and health and whatever, but very peripheral, as a teenager. I just saw this little flyer because back then, there was no social media. So it was flyers stuck on notice boards and it was yoga. And I thought, oh, well, I love gymnastics. Maybe yoga is something that I would like to do. I had an inkling that I had a spiritual aspect to it. Yeah, so I went along and it was in the Satyananda tradition, which they used to wear robes and the teacher was a really peaceful, beautiful woman. I was the youngest in this class by a long shot. Anyway, she guided us basically through some really gentle stretches and then into a deep yoga nidra, which, as you would know, sometimes in the West they get called body scan meditations as a sort of surface level experience of a true yoga nidra. And my last memory that I have of my first yoga class is my dad waking me up
You
because
injured well.
apparently I had slept through the majority of the yoga class and they'd all left. And the teacher, who was so polite, had let me sleep until a responsible adult came to collect
Oh my
me.
God, it's amazing. So how old were you when you had clarity about your condition?
I was around 10. And so then just hitting that tween kind of time. So it was like I had an early experience in my life where I had to really readjust how I took care of myself, or I had to grow up quickly in terms of understanding self-care and how to manage my health.
Because they told you have to do less effectively.
Exactly.
And prior to that, you had been doing all the things and then probably being just wondering why you couldn't have the same output as others for as much time. And did you have a story about that when you were younger? Like, did you make that about something wrong with you?
I think the story was it's unfair because I felt I've got so much to give. How am I going to do all the things if I am kind of being held back? So heading into my teens, I think I kind of had times where I rallied against it and I just pushed. I just went 120% when really I probably only had 80% or 70% to give in the first place. So, the up and down of it. And then I'd pull back and I'd get back into yoga and I'd stop partying or whatever for at least a week.
I remember my first marathon, my big training regimen, which again, people on the podcast will know I've struggled with substance abuse. It's been part of my journey. But my big training regimen before my first marathon was no alcohol for 2 days. And I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be tough." Now I look back like, so it's all welcome here.
Yeah. And maybe a little shame. I think that comes through sometimes. And maybe this is true for all of us, but we have the game face, we have the outward face. And when there's things that are behind that aren't necessarily matching up 100% with that outward feel of that part of your personality, maybe there's an element there where you have to hide it a little bit. Or, I certainly didn't go through my teens or my early 20s telling people, like I've just told on a podcast, that I had this condition. And I mean, look, it didn't stop me doing anything really. It just meant internally I was conflicted because I felt like I had a lot more to give. And that still occurs now in my life. I feel like I've always got a lot more to give, but I'm just sort of not able to probably give it all just with my natural energy levels. Yeah.
Yeah. And you phrased it the way I would, which I think you said, you feel lucky now that you've had this experience and you had it really early. And everyone who just listened to the introduction knows that you have accomplished a tremendous amount in a lot of different fields in a very short time. So I think I've got like a sense of where you came from, some of the constraints and motivating factors, and you have this experience with yoga. I'm wondering what it was at that time. What was it that spoke to you? And then what kind of captured you there? Or what was working, I guess? How did it affect you in a positive way?
I think because I'm very much a person in my body and a physically present person, I have really high sensitivity to all physical experiences, which is amazing, sometimes overwhelming. And so for me, yoga was this beautiful pathway through my body and my breathing to get access into my mind, which I'd never been given that opportunity before. I was growing up in Tasmania, within Australia, very white culture, middle upper class experience, a private school. Yes, it was a Catholic school. So yes, I had some religious education, which I really valued, but it didn't necessarily always resonate with me, those spiritual teachings. So yoga provided me as a very young woman at 17 some access into some questions that I guess I'd had about how I was in the world and why I was that way. It gave me permission to slow down and to stop, which from what we've just spoken about is obviously not something that was given space for. And that's not a slight on anyone in my life or, the way I was parented or anything. We're in a busy culture. And so at 17, I guess my body was telling me I needed to slow down. And so slowing down my body or becoming more connected to my body through the mindfulness aspect of the movement in yoga really gave me opportunity to really do some great self-inquiry, which I think I've naturally always done. I've got memories as a small child of sitting and quite still in a tree because I love to climb trees. I love heights.
Mm-hmm. They're very fun.
Very fun. But I think it was the permission piece. So I think as a child, maybe there was like opportunity for daydreaming, exploring nature, had quite a free childhood like that. But I don't think that the messaging was necessarily there in my experience as a child and a young person, that self-exploration was something that is normal, natural, or a good thing to do. So yoga offered this opportunity for full permission because that is what yoga is. It's a self-inquiry practice. And it gave me some structure to do it, which I think I really needed at that time, and still really enjoy the structure of the yoga practice to pull me back into some self-inquiry that allows me to go a little deeper. Yeah.
You've mentioned to me before that you are in particular a kinesthetic and a visual learner.
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of the learning of yoga, or did you get to yoga because you knew that?
Oh, I had no idea. I had no insight into that at that age. It was just an intuitive, natural thing that I like to move my body. I could see that yoga, I got to do some stretches and maybe some handstands or something. I mean, I live in the West, so a lot of the information that I knew about yoga was these kind of physically flexible feats, which appealed to me because I love gymnastics and dance and things like that. So it was very much just initially the physical aspect, just like an intuitive, natural thing. I had no cognitive understanding of the way that I learned or the way that I was in the world at that time. But 100%, and still to this day, being in my body and moving my body is a spiritual experience for me. And it definitely is like the first stepping stone to go into a meditative state, or, even like I call it, mental health first aid, like a frontline quick fix for me. So preparing for the podcast today, like I danced around, shook it out, and use my body to access my mind in a clearer way.
I have to bite on that. Mental health first aid. Where does that concept come from? Is it self-created? And then if you were to describe that as specifically as possible, so someone who's listening could like picture you doing it, what would that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if it's mental health first aid. It's probably mental state first aid should be a better term, because in Australia, mental health generally gets tied up in more of the psychiatric situation, like whether you're diagnosed with a mental health condition. So I guess what I'm talking about is mental state or mental well-being first aid. So it really speaking to self-regulation. So having the insight, I'm churned up, I'm getting a dump of adrenaline because I'm about to speak to Skippy on a podcast.
Very scary.
Yes, super scary. My heart rate's up. I can feel that. Butterflies in my tummy, So if I'm noticing these things, then rather than going into a loop pattern of, am I going to be good enough? Am I going to stuff up? And what am I going to say? Which is completely unhelpful. I recognize the signs in my body, and then I want to do some first aid. So I want to take some initial action to perpetuate that into a better cognitive state or a better state of well-being. So I might be noticing those thoughts. I might be noticing that I'm feeling low mood, that I'm kind of having this negative, critical kind of filter in my thoughts. And so the first aid is, okay, I got to get back into my body. I got to get really grounded and embodied here. Whether I need to shake it up, I need to get some fresh air, I need to stretch out, getting into my body, helping reposition my mental state. So I guess the first aid piece means that I'm applying the tonic, the medicine, in the instance. When I say first aid, it's like, what can I do right now to get me feeling better? For me, it does come a lot to movement. Like I jump up and down, I shake it out, I make some sound. I guess with my yoga knowledge in terms of working with the energetic lines in the body, the nadis, like I might do certain movements to stimulate certain energies in the body. If I need to be a little more intuitive, I'll focus on my left side body. If I need to really get myself a little more focused and concentrate, I might, kind of tune in more right side body. But I mean, those layers of yoga knowledge aren't necessary for this to work. There could be any number of things for people. So sometimes when I'm working with clients, it might be a smell and aroma that works really well for people. Having an essential oil that really lights them up, that makes them feel good, and just carrying that in a little roller bottle or something. Smell is so powerful in our brain. Lots of great science around that. There's so many things for some people, it's just stepping outside and looking up to the sky, that reminder of the big picture to give perspective. We sometimes lose perspective, right? Like our perspective is lost generally when we're anxious, we're feeling anxiety, we're getting stressed. The brain tends to get narrow. So I think a lot of this mental health first aid that I'm talking about is trying to get people to broaden their view. Because I work in this space and because I am how I am in the world, it can be easy for me to use my body to do these things because I am very kinesthetic. I am very connected to my body, and other people aren't. For someone listening to the podcast today, this idea of getting into their body to shift their mental state could be really foreign. What does movement do? We're moving all the time, but we're not necessarily conscious of the movement, right? Like we're getting from A to B, walking, we're moving around the office, we're clicking the mouse, whatever, that's all movement. The movement I'm talking about is movement that is allowing us to really connect to the senses, noticing how I am, how my body is.
So what I'm hearing from you is mental health or mental well-being first aid, and we would probably say mental health here. The words are a little bit more mashed up, and we can get into that if you want to, but I don't think it's critical for this. Is the steps are basically awareness, noticing or naming, a pattern interrupt, a release, and a reset. So you're first bringing awareness to what's happening. My heart rate is elevated. I'm sweating. I'm something.
Mm-hmm.
For many people, this will be so common for them as to not know that it's not something that you don't desire. And I have definitely been there. I lived in stress all the time for years, and I just thought, "Ooh, this is my get up and go juice. I love this." Didn't know that was not a place that was beneficial for me to act from. So first you're just noticing the thing, then you're naming it, right? So you're identifying, oh, this is what's going on. I feel this here in my body. I'm noticing this emotion, etc. And then you're throwing in some kind of pattern interrupt. And what I'm hearing from you is it's not hypercritical which one you use. You use the one that's best for you. It could be a scent that triggers a memory for you. Yeah. It could be something from your yoga practice if you have that. Yeah. It could be literally shaking your body as if a dog gets out of the water and it's just releasing that energy.
Favorite, that one, yeah.
Could be some noise. This is familiar to me when I'm out skiing, my favorite activity, because a bunch of grown adults are hooting and hollering and yelling at each other off the lift because it's fun. And it's just a way to release energy. So you're doing something to pattern interrupt. And then you're grounding that interruption and re-engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. Again, variety of tools. It could be breath. It could be movement. But you're effectively allowing yourself to calm down. And then from that place of calm awareness, you're re-engaging with the activity. You're not avoiding the podcast. You're going back into it.
Sure.
Is that a fair summary?
Yeah. And I think just to add to that last piece, you're going back in with greater perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece there, because the reason that we're wanting to do all those steps, which you so perfectly summarized, thank you so much, is to gain that greater awareness. And particularly if we're talking about in the context of leaders under pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't overstate, as someone who's been a leader under pressure in the room, staring down angry opposition, how much more capable I have been to respond from clarity, strength, but also kindness and compassion in the room when I've taken the time to set my nervous system up, and how often, but not always, that is then positively received and reflected and creates better outcomes in the room.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who's not driving right now, I'm just going to do a quick little 15-second something and just kind of notice how you've been feeling. You've been feeling this way all day. You're sitting on the couch, you're in the kitchen, you're prepping dinner, you're out for a walk, whatever it is. Find yourself a place to sit right now And just gonna allow yourself to sit, plop. There you are. You're gonna straighten up your back just a little bit. You're going to allow your eyelids to close. And with those eyelids closed, the first thing you're going to notice is your feet planted firmly on the ground beneath you. You're going to place your hands on your thighs or the side of the chair. You're going to sit up just another half inch taller. And with your eyes still closed, we're going to give a little 3-second shake. You just shake and shimmy your body, whatever it is. Exhale. We're going to inhale together. Exhale together. 2 more in the nose, holding at the top and out the mouth. Inhale in the nose. Hold. Exhale out the mouth. As audible as you wish. Breathe in the nose. Hold. Exhale audibly out the mouth. Allow the cheeks on your face to fall. Allow your forehead to unwrinkle. Let your jaw unhinge. Let the tongue fall off the roof of your mouth. Take one more breath. Begin to wiggle your fingers and toes, bringing a little energy back into your body, and very slowly open your eyes. What do you notice? What do you notice, Anna?
Feel good, clearer, calmer, which is nice. Thank you.
I notice my voice cadence is lower.
Yes.
I notice my shoulders are softer. So that's 15 seconds. But I think for those who, like a previous version of me, would have been like, getting into the body, what is that? Hopefully that provides you a little insight. And if you were driving, look at the timestamp right now, save this podcast, and when you get home later today or tomorrow or in a week, just fast forward to this timestamp, hit back 30 seconds once, and give it a go. You'll be surprised.
Yeah. And that's exactly it, right? That's the first aid piece there. It's what we can do right here in an instance, and it only takes a short moment, but I think it's so powerful.
It's so good. So much I want to know about how you got to now. I just want to give you an opportunity to share some of the myriad techniques you're trained in. There's just a lot of interesting stuff here. And if you would like to, I would love to learn a bit more about one or two of them that people might not know.
I studied psychology and sports science at university, and that led to what we call being an accredited exercise physiologist. I'm not a physiotherapist, so I'm not doing manual manipulation of people or exercise, movement, and motivational counseling is really what I do to help people to move their bodies so that they can feel comfortable in their own skin to live the life that they want to live. Whether it's, for some of us, it's just to be able to do the basic activities of daily living. And for other people, it's for high performance. I've really needed to and wanted to integrate the myriad of yoga practices that I have learned from a lot of different teachers. I don't subscribe to one particular yoga lineage. I'm very much a person that takes little bits from everywhere because I think there's value in all of the ways. So when I'm asked, oh, what style of yoga do you teach? I say Anna's style. And, not that I'm elevating myself to the great yogis. That's just absolutely what it is and 100% authentic. Me taking all of my learnings and just being the conduit for that and putting that out into the world based on the person in front of me. And that is something that whether I've got my exercise physiology hat, my yoga teaching hat, my coaching hat, I am present with the person in front of me. So whenever I'm working with someone, I bring all of the hats, all of the learnings and the experience, and I just do my best to deliver what I'm feeling in that moment that person needs. And so even in this role as a political wellbeing coach, I bring all of that. I bring the yoga, I bring the mindfulness, I bring exercise physiology, so really deeply understanding how the physiology of someone works, the nervous system, the brain, and, some of these neat techniques of hypnotherapy and meditation and how we're communicating. For me, it's just taking all of the experience and knowledge, the opportunities that I've had in working with so many amazing people over the years. I've learned so much from them. And then I just take that and see if that's going to help the next person.
Anna style is not actually a particular style. It's a recognition that you can pull a variety of things from your toolbox to meet the person in front of you where they are. And so for each person, it's going to be different because each person's needs and backgrounds and experiences are different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now a quick break from our sponsors, and we'll be right back to the show. The Healing Our Politics podcast is brought to you by the Elected Leaders Collective, the first, leading, and most highly recognized name in mental health, well-being, and performance coaching for elected leaders and public servants, designed specifically for you. Now, don't be fooled by the name. The Elected Leaders Collective is not just for elected leaders. It is for all public servants, staffers, volunteers, government, nonprofit, whole organizations. This is for you. If you are filled with passion for improving your community and world, but are tired, as I am, of the anger, stress, and vitriol, if you find yourself banging your head against that same wall, struggling with the incoming criticism and threats, arguing with colleagues who are supposed to be on your team, and questioning if it's even worth it anymore, then the Elected Leaders Collective programming is specifically for you. With the Elected Leaders Collective, you will learn to become a hashtag political healer, building the authentic, unshakable confidence and courage to stay true to yourself through the anger and pressure, while cultivating the open, empathetic mind to meet others with the curiosity, compassion, and kindness necessary to respond to threats, improve challenging relationships, de-escalate conflict, and bring people in your community together to solve real problems and get shit done. You'll reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, and become a more effective leader while having time for your family, yourself, your health, and your wealth, sleeping well at night, and showing others they can too. Now that's leadership. Healing Our Politics listeners receive 10% off all Elected Leaders Collective services using the code hashtag political healer. Use it today and become one of the brave political leaders healing our politics. Use code hashtag political healer by going to www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. That's www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. Let's jump in to what we do now, and just how would you describe your work in the political well-being area?
Yeah, well, I would start off by describing it as exciting.
Nice.
Yeah. I think it's just taking all of this really good stuff and applying it to people that have put their hand up to serve their communities. And I really admire and respect our elected leaders. And I guess for me, supporting people that are doing some really amazing things in the world is super exciting. So for us here at Locale Learning, we're a really small business, and we're actually based in this tiny little town on the east coast of Australia, or about 6 hours north of Sydney. Emma, who I work with, Locale Learning is really her brainchild and her passion. So she is a former lawyer and has worked in local government her whole life. She really saw the need to take what she was doing from that governance perspective. She was seeing people step up to lead their communities and to unfortunately have, quite negative experiences at times. And she could see the pressure they were under because she was working, closely with them in a different role. And so she bravely was like, right, I'm going to pivot my business and I'm going to try and educate and support elected leaders at a local government level here in Australia. I'm not exactly sure how that translates, Skippy, for you guys, but we have 3 tiers of government: our federal level, a state level, and then our local level.
Same
Similar,
thing.
yeah, same. Yeah.
Yeah. You probably use different words for the units of measure, but it's the same. You probably have provinces or something like that, and we have states, et cetera. But yes.
Similar level. So that really on the ground level of politics, our elected leaders in council are living with their constituents. They are literally at the same cafe, they're at the soccer fields on a Saturday morning. So it's very much the grassroots level of politics here in Australia. Perhaps the most complicated when it does come to that personal and professional divide.
So how did you get roped into this
project? Exactly. How did I get
Yes.
roped in? Exactly. So COVID. In COVID, Emma could see people were really struggling, seeing the local elected leaders really struggling, and she reached out to me. Emma and I met because she came to my yoga classes. That's pretty much how I know everyone in my life, because they've done a yoga class with me. And she asked, would I come and do a complimentary webinar, open it up to local government leaders across Australia on how to stay motivated and stay well during that time.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the word, we've overused it, unprecedented pressure. And so I did it, and I loved it because it was exciting for me to see this group of people that showed up online. They just soaked it up like sponges. It was like a light had been shed on their experience. And I guess, again, that permission piece, permission to actually take care of themselves as leaders, to maybe be a little vulnerable and to show that human side. We haven't looked back. Basically, from that complimentary webinar that Emma just asked me to facilitate, a one-off, 2.5 years down the track, we have developed a suite of training that looks specifically at well-being. And we're actually working on a specific framework that's really relevant to the political leadership space and addressing some of those unique stresses that politicians would experience.
One of the things that comes up in the Mere Mortals report that very much mirrors our experience in the States is, I think the stats are 70% of elected officials say that they would want some support or could benefit from support of their mental well-being, but 25% say they would not receive that support even if it was available because of fear of reputational harm or cultural stigma. 65% say they don't have the time, and 50% say they don't have the money. So basically, you have this huge mass of people who have very high consequence jobs who could use support but aren't getting it for a variety of reasons. That's totally what we find. We find it's very hard to get people in the door and in the practice, even if they say this is a problem for me and I could use support. Do you guys find the same thing?
At a surface level, that is 100% true. Stigma is a huge problem, and I think that's just historically the nature of politics, in that perhaps weaponization of any weakness that a political leader might show. A few weeks ago, our former Prime Minister came forward and has publicly declared that he was being treated for severe anxiety during his term. He was a leader during COVID and has released a book, and subsequently in the book spoken about his struggle with severe anxiety, which he received pharmaceutical treatment for, but didn't really mention any other supports that he might have got. And I think that's an interesting piece there. If our political leaders were to be seen, heading into a therapist's office, would that be weaponized against them? It's normal for even a leader to have to go to the GP, and no one's necessarily going to know what that prescribes. And the stigma around perhaps 1, disclosing, mental struggles, 2, being treated for that, and then 3, the types of treatment that they might seek, whether it's preventative or treatment.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in with a PSA here because I think it's important for people to understand, and this is not a case against pharmacological interventions. We are unbelievably lucky to live in a time where those are available to us. And for some people, that is the right option. And it is not the right option for everybody. It's something that we often jump to, sometimes prematurely or just unnecessarily. And in many, but not all cases, what we're doing is treating the symptom, not the root cause. And in treating the symptom, very frequently, we also have side effects. Whereas if you can treat the root cause through non-pharmacological interventions in a coaching container or a therapy container or something else, and sometimes it's yes and it's both, you are not only treating the symptoms that you're experiencing and suffering with, but you're also up-leveling your understanding of self and, as an extension, others and society in a way that will make you infinitely more able to understand and connect with your work day to day, be it policy or communication or conflict resolution or negotiation. And so really doing the work, quote unquote, as we say, like the internal work, is the equivalent of going to the gym.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's nothing wrong with taking Ozempic if you have a weight issue and that's affecting your heart, etc. But if you're going to the gym, you are also going to lose the weight and you're going to improve bone density. You're going to improve your social life because you're going to meet people there. You're going to improve your self-confidence. You're going to improve your ability to respond resiliently. And so the same thing is true. And so I just want to put in that PSA of applying the work comes with many other leadership growth opportunities that a pill, even if the pill is what you should do, will not come with.
Yeah. It's so true. Looking at the whole person, that 360-degree approach to all of the things that you just suggested, around the whole of their well-being that could be addressed. And that's the space that I'm really excited to be working in. What can we take from what we know generally around mental health, mental well-being, and high performance? Because look, in Emma, in my opinion, like we approach working with our elected leaders as high performing people.
Yeah.
I mean, we are working with people that do have good resilience levels. They do have learned levels of stress management. They tend to be naturally, like what we would say, thick-skinned people. They're not stepping into the political sphere generally without all of those things already there in their personality or having been learnt from their experiences previously. We're aware that what we're doing is taking the knowledge we have to these high performing people in a way that makes sense to them, and particularly increasing the awareness of the multiple points of stress or stressors that are coming in.
Yeah.
Working individually with our elected leaders to elevate them back into that space of being able to perform at the level that they're wanting to, because they're passionate people, they're purpose-led people. It doesn't sit well for them generally if their performance is lacking, because they put their hand up for a reason. They want to make a difference. So generally we find that they're highly motivated to be mentally well. We are coming across more and more leaders that are looking to us and other resources for support and being prepared to put their hand up. I mean, look, I don't know if they're putting it out there on their social media or anything like that, but they're coming in the door. They're signing up to our webinars. We do a lot of complimentary work, and I know you've jumped on a couple of our complimentary things, and that's purposeful from Emma and my perspective. We want to break down some of the stigma. We want to have more people having this conversation with us, because through that we can only, progress as a society, I think, in taking care of the people that we've elected to serve us.
Here's the analogy that just popped into my head, and you don't know me that well, but random analogies are kind of my thing. So in terms of the cultural shift, I think about professional baseball or just professional sports, but professional baseball comes to mind because back in the early days of baseball, the days of Babe Ruth and these like legends of the game, smoking and drinking were a huge part of the culture. So these players would be out getting hammered the night before a game. And the culture was as such that if you didn't do that back then, the other players would look down at you and call you a, insert offensive expletive here, right? Like you were weak for not going out and drinking a bunch of booze before a game. Well, fast forward to modern day. We're paying athletes millions of dollars. They are training their butts off. They're training their minds. They're training their bodies. They're training everything every day. Imagine how you would feel if you were a fan and your team finally made the World Series and your ace pitcher comes out on the mound and throws a terrible game 7 and you find out he was out drinking the night before.
I love the analogy because I think it's true. The difference is, though, with high-performing athletes, often they get to have just one event that they're building up to. And I think with our political leaders, it's just a constant. There's always another game or another big event. And for me, that says that even more there has to be the recovery time and the other things built in to bolster their performance even more than an athlete.
Yeah, and one of the things that you will learn, I don't know, I can't speak for your containers, but if you were in a coaching program with us, is boundaries are part of your job. If you have no boundaries, you are going to be a very poor performer and you're going to be out of that game really quickly. And the trap of always doing everything for everyone all the time, 24/7, is a trap of our own construction.
Yes.
We can go back to our most famous presidents. FDR in wartime was at his time off place for 90 days in the middle of World War II. That's not an exact timestamp, but for a long period of time. And if you go back and look at some of the quotes, he recognized that he was only able to make the decisions that were required for the saving or losing the lives of tens of millions of Americans with the right mind. And built structures around himself to facilitate that proactively. And so it is our job to do that. It's part of what we would do in a coaching container. And so, to me, this is ultimately about not just high performance, but prolonged performance.
Yeah, the sustainability, absolutely.
100%. I'll be speaking at a conference upcoming, and we're kind of tweaking the talk a little bit. And one of the things we're going to do is share that stat about 70% of people wanting to have support, but 65% effectively not doing it. And we'll do a hand raise where 1 out of every 8 people gets to raise their hand. And then you look around the room and say, like, okay, well, if we want to keep going in the status quo, this is how many of your colleagues, your allies, quote unquote, that you're going to have left to work with in a handful of years. Good luck. It's just not sustainable. And so, yes, it will take time to shift the culture. It's going to take time to go from all the boys are partying before the World Series to the boys get paid to take this seriously to win the game. It's going to take time. But do you want to be on the front end of that, to be revered and look back on as one of the people that actually started taking your job seriously for the best interest of your constituents? And I think that's the question that, 5 years from now, we're going to be asking in the rearview mirror.
It's so true. To add to that, and it's modern politics now, right?
Yes.
It's faster paced, social media in particular, as we know. The research is there, like the negative impacts of social media on everybody's mental well-being, and then particularly people who have a public profile and political leaders. I think actually our current Prime Minister just was quoted as saying, I never read the comments on my social media, he said, because I wouldn't leave my house if I did. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like there's got to be the boundaries there.
Yeah. One of the things that I am most interested in your perspective on, because you come from an exercise physiology background, you had interest in training professional and world-class athletes. I would not consider myself a world-class athlete, but I certainly was a competitive athlete for a long period of time. And for me personally, diet and exercise were absolutely the gateway. If it wasn't for those things, none of the downstream mental health work could have been present. And it is absolutely the case for me personally that those are the last things to go. Like if I have to choose one thing for my mental health, it's long-form cardio, period, end of story. There's nothing else that comes close for me. And so I wonder how much you think about being prescriptive versus self-directed in your coaching. You talk about having the flexibility to bring in different things from your toolkit, but are you telling people, hey, you should do this, or you should try this, you should follow this plan? Or are you on the full, like if it's a spectrum, the full self-directed is like, what do you think is best for you? And I'm going to support you. And I've seen both things work. Where are you in that spectrum? Do you have an answer? Are you figuring it out? I'm so curious to know how you think about that.
The middle path. And it might seem like a cop-out, but it's not. Like, I mean, so much of Eastern philosophy comes back to the middle way. And that's not true for everyone. Some people do need to be on either end of the spectrum. And as a coach or a facilitator, that is absolutely my job, to meet that person where they're at and at the best of my ability on that spectrum, help them whatever end. But even within one person, there's going to be different pieces of the puzzle that require different support, different ways of coaching or different ways of facilitating. I mean, I'm not a dietitian. I don't give advice on diet except it's just some basics. I definitely share, but I'm a really big referrer in that part of it. That's not my domain. So I do like to refer out, point people to really great resources. Exercise, that is my domain. And we're human. We need to move. We are designed to move. There is no question about that. And I love to support that. The motivation piece behind that is probably the more interesting discussion. You know, how do we get people to move? How do we get people to connect to the desire to move, value exercise and movement? I mean, Skippy, it sounds like you've had a personal experience where you've really been able to work it out and stick with it and have an experience of being an athlete. For people that haven't had that experience.
Well, I'll just also say very, very hard fought, long and asynchronous road to that. You know, for my entire youth, adolescence into young adulthood, I yo-yoed fairly dramatically between periods of athleticism and being very overweight. I mean, obese is what you would, I guess, call it based on a BMI scale. And it was a hard-won challenge that eventually I did find mediation with, and it's remarkable. And that first experience, you know, was the benchmark of I can beat some stuff, that provided the first stone of confidence up the arc to eventually reach the capstone of I know shit's going to come up. It's going to go sideways. It's not going to go well, but I know that I have the ability to meet whatever it is. But that's a 30+ year journey.
I love that. And yeah, none of this is easy, I don't think. Like none of this business of taking care of ourselves is easy. Some of us are naturally have a greater propensity towards being aware of our self-care and our well-being. And for others, it's less important, or there's different expressions of it. And so, you know, this idea of the spectrum, I think it comes back to meeting each person exactly where they're at, to have the skills to discern what approach I need to take with each person. And then that next layer down, when we're looking at the different aspects of their well-being, where do I need to be more prescriptive and where do I need to encourage that self-efficacy?
You know, my formal training is as a, you know, what we would say in the coaching world is a transformational coach. And that methodology is, it is not prescriptive. It's about cultivating the container, creating this space, regulating the nervous system, asking the right questions for people to get down deep into the root of what's driving their behaviors, and then let them test and find things that are best for them, recognizing that that's slower, but ultimately stickier and more empowering.
Agree.
And the truth is, the athlete in me, who, you know, is also a type A challenger, I do have many clients who have incredible physical fitness and whatever, but I have a lot who don't, who live a very sedentary, office-bound life. There's part of me that wants to say, like, hey, if you're going to work with me, you're required to do 2 hours of activity a week, because I just know in my actual mind that there will be benefit. 100% time there will be benefit. But then the coach training side of me, you know, wants to like shame myself, like, no, you can't do that. That's not good. Like, you're going to be robbing them of their agency, calm it down. And so I go through that dance in my head, and I wonder what you would say to that.
Well, again, the middle way. Like, I think your intuition there to say that to them, I think that's powerful, because I think you have a lived experience of that perhaps in yourself, and it's worked. And I mean, look at our high performance athletes, like they are told exactly what to do.
For sure.
Yes, they might have an innate desire to perform, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them have a natural talent, but it's been a situation of a whole team of people supporting them to get them where they are. It's not like they've been motivated every day. Sometimes they've needed people to tell them, you know what, you got to get out there today. That's just a fact. So yeah, in my experience as a healthcare professional, as a clinician, like I think it's yes and maybe, as a high achieving type A personality as well, sometimes it just feels good to someone else tell me what to do.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I love it. If I go into a coach and they're like, oh, I don't know how you feel, I'm like, next. I'm like, I don't have time for that. I'm here because I don't know what to do, so tell me and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. So there you go.
But that would never work for my partner, who's also a coach. Like that would never work for her, right? To your point, we're all individuals.
Yeah. And therefore, the skill as a facilitator, as a coach, as a trainer, whatever, it comes down to trusting your intuition, but also taking the learned experiences, because I love coaching and I love the transformational coaching philosophy, that it's deeply grounded in a lot of great science as well. But we're messy, we're complicated humans. And so we need a bit of everything.
What type of containers do you work in one-to-one? Do you have particular time frames? How often are you meeting? What's the blocking and tackling of working with Locale Learning or with you specifically as a coach?
Well, there's no straight answer. I mean, look, we have prescriptive programs, so we've set them up sort of like a 3-part short lift-off type coaching package. We get to have a 15-minute discovery call. Sometimes it goes for 30, and then we send through the client a package. They can take some time to read it and see things that we would like to offer them based on the phone call, and then pricing according to that. We do tend to find that a lot of people would like that as a start point, because this is the start, this is the end. You get to choose 3 things you'd like to work on over the 3 sessions.
Is it a check these boxes or can they say anything?
Well, we would have identified it probably in the discovery call.
Okay.
And it's not that we have to work to those 3 things, but there's an opportunity there to work to 3 different areas. Having said that, we also offer more open-ended opportunities where people can choose a longer form coaching package where it is a little bit more in flow. And so it might be that there's just one main thing that we have to work on over an 8-session period, or whatever comes up in each session is what we work on. We decided with this 3-point thing because we found that people weren't sure why they wanted to work with us. Like they knew that they were stressed. There was conflict, relationship breakdown within the elected body, conflict between governance and staff, or, they might have been experiencing stress around social media, bullying, that sort of thing. And then sometimes people are coming in and they're really needing help with their personal lives because the impact has bled into their personal life. We kind of sometimes present what we're doing quite prescriptively, to use that word, because with this coaching, people were coming with more specific professional issues, pinpoint issues, and or personal stuff. And so we found that it was nice, kind of like stepping stone, that lily pad, to say, right, you've got 3 sessions. If there's 3 things you want to work with, we're going to workshop these per session. And then if there's more work you want to do, then you can step into this other level of long form coaching. And look, we're in early stages. Maybe there's a different way of doing it. I think for us, we're trying to, as you are, break down the stigma. We have different flavor to you as well, of course. I don't really know how to describe it, but I know that the work that you're doing is sort of like more familiar to me outside of my political wellbeing coaching and more in that life coaching, general wellbeing coaching. In this sphere, we tend to be working a little more within this framework that we're developing. I think to break down the stigma, we felt that we needed to sort of be like, well, these are the facts. The Mere Mortals report from Apolitical Foundation showing this research is showing this. There's been some great work done by Ashley Weinberg. He's identified that there's these particular stressor types, institutional stressors, cultural stressors. and then the individual layer as well. And so we've sort of taken all of these things and tried to distill it into something that is culturally relevant here in Australia to our local government politicians here.
Let me put myself back 3 months into my first term. What would I say? I had 3 things to work on. I would have probably said, I have all these great plans that I've been working on for years, and I can't even get anyone to read them. What do I do?
Yep.
I would have probably said, I'm trying to do what I think is my job, which is bring the public who voted for me in to demand what they need. And my colleagues are pissed at me for it, and I don't understand why. And I probably would have said, I'm just completely overwhelmed. I am on my phone from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed 7 days a week. Help.
Yeah, I love
Is that
that.
similar to what
Yes,
you...
100%. 100%.
I realize there's 100 solutions that could work, but like if we pick one of those, what might I leave the session with?
So I would pick, so in my role, I would be coaching you with the overwhelm piece.
Okay.
Emma, my colleague, would probably step in with your other two because her background really allows her to support people around conflict coaching, governance, legislation, where and how to do the job of being an elected leader on that level.
Awesome.
And then I step in more with the soft skills of leadership and general life organization.
What might I leave that session knowing, or would I have a system or an approach? Like what would I leave with?
If you came to me and the session was really on this overwhelm, I would be talking to you about boundaries and what boundaries are. Because sometimes people aren't sure what it is to have a boundary around time and energy. Some people don't always understand their energetic output. So that would be probably a conversation that we'd be having as well. Like, how is it for you to be naturally feeling good? What does it feel like for you to feel overwhelmed? What does it feel like for you to feel tired or exhausted, and to start to have a little bit more language and understanding around their energy and how it works for them. And remembering that boundaries are for us to keep, not for others to enforce or keep for us. How does that look for that particular person? So you mentioned being on your phone from first thing in the morning. I would definitely jump into and workshop that with you. You know, why is that? A little bit of questioning around what's the need for that? Is that something that is expected of you or that you expect of yourself? How are you feeling? You know, what are you noticing when you do that? What are you noticing around what else is happening in your house if that's where you are at that time? It's also individualized, but with overwhelm, I think it's necessary and important to look at boundaries and understanding your energy output as a person. And maybe I would jump in a little bit with it's bland, but I think it's really relevant, looking at people's ability to prioritize and time management and some structural skills around diary management and things as well. Like I do think that is a valuable, helpful thing.
Yes, my for podcast listeners and not YouTube viewers, my eyes just got 4 times larger than their normal diameter. I'm like, yes, that.
But I would definitely start the session out by asking you, how do you want to feel at the end? What do you want to walk away from with this session? And getting people to articulate that in terms of how they feel. And that's what I would work towards.
Yeah, beautiful. So that might be a great bridge into this new well-being framework specifically for politics that you guys have. You've had a bunch of clients. You've tried a bunch of different things for different people with different needs. I'm sure you've tried different approaches naturally, organically, and also intentionally. So what has worked with clients? What has really not worked with clients? And then what have you cherry-picked to put into this political well-being framework?
We're still working out what's working and what hasn't worked. I can't be definitive on that. We've had great feedback on everything we've put out there, which is exciting, but also hard for us to pick and choose what is the most effective. Here in New South Wales, so the state of New South Wales, we're just about to head into elections for local government in September this year. So this previous election cycle that we've just worked through has been the groundwork for us. And we feel like as a collective, we're about to really launch into the world the learnings that we've taken from this election cycle into this next one. So we're really excited to be sort of delivering things a little more formally in terms of our well-being. We've been doing some one-on-one coaching, which we were just speaking about. But this framework that we've been working on is sort of our flagship into really propelling what is political well-being into the world. Yes, our framework is specific to local government councillors in Australia, but I think it's all relevant and would apply across a lot of other jurisdictions. It's actually something that we're launching into the world for individual counsellors to take and use as a self-guided experience. Of course, we are pointing them in the direction of utilizing services like ours, like yours, and a whole bunch of other resources. But our intention with this work is very much to elevate the conversation that you and I are having now into something that is black and white on paper, bolstered by the research of the Apolitical Foundation and others, so that our leaders can have a reference point, a framework to work through. We've identified 8 core elements that we believe are the most important in terms of elected leaders' impact and performance, wanting our leaders to understand the correlation between their mental well-being and their ability to execute what they want to as a leader, and to draw that line for them. And it might seem obvious, but it's not. And so we're really wanting each individual elected leader to have this self-awareness on, are these stressors that are unique to me as a counsellor, are they impacting? And if they are impacting, how are they impacting?
I'd love to pretend that that person is listening, and we probably don't have to pretend. So you are taking them through these 8 periods of well-being to execution as a leader, or to being a more effective leader. And I wonder how much of that course is the meta learning of this is important, like tying that together for them, versus the learning of how to do it and put it into action. And if any of it is the meta learning, how do you get them to opt into the program before they fully understand that?
I can't answer your question on how are we going to get them to opt in yet, because I really don't know. There's a whole lot of hope, goodwill, and determination behind us, just like with you, right? Like, we know this is important. This conversation today is hopefully going to have a few more ears listening in. We're going to keep shouting from the rooftops, approaching political organizations and sharing what we're doing. We're madly waving our arms around like, pick us for your next conference, your next forum. We're working hard to get ourselves out there. But more specifically, there's 8 core elements, which I'll go through in a sec. But how we ask people to move through the process is that first, people need to be aware of what the stressors are. And it sounds obvious, but it's not always obvious. And I think awareness is key. Then we ask the elected leader to identify from those 8 elements which ones are most out of balance or of most importance to them to address initially. Of course, they probably all need addressing, but most people will have some that are really in dire need of some support, some work. Then from there, we've actually identified specific mindsets for each of the 8 elements. So the next step is to adopt the mindset for that element that you're wanting to work on. And I talk you through that.
Yeah.
So if it was the overwhelm thing, there's going to be a mindset that we want to adopt to come out of overwhelm. And then the micro skills within this core element need to be developed to make change. And there's going to be skills that we're going to want to learn and implement. And then the final piece is to access resources. So whether it's coaching, online resources that are available, which we've listed them, we've gone deep and wide to cast the net to allow our elected leaders to have a whole suite of points of information and support that they could dive into. We'd like to think that the coaching that we do would be absolutely a piece in that, because we're really invested in the elected leader space. But there is a lot of good stuff out there, and we definitely want to point people to all sorts of ways of getting help because there's no one answer.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go through the 8 elements, these 8 things that we've identified. And this is off the back of the research that Apolitical have done, but more specifically, Ashley Weinberg has done in looking at political well-being prior to that Mere Mortals report that Apolitical did. Number 1, the obvious one, your physical and mental health. So this is talking about your diet, your exercise, and your general mental health. And that's where that little kind of sticky bit is with our definitions. This is about political well-being, so your political mental well-being impacting on your performance. So people can be great politicians and have pre-existing mental health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And so your mental health is something that is like your physical health. There is lots of things that can support that specifically. Now, of course, if we're becoming unwell physically because we're eating Tim Tams and hot chips.
I know what Tim Tams are, but not everyone's going to get that reference.
Don't they? Is that an Australian thing? Oh my
yes.
gosh. Okay. Chocolate biscuits. The chocolate biscuits, they're quite delicious. But we do have a thing here around eating a whole pack of Tim Tams as an emotional sponge. Yes. Yeah. The point being that if your physical and mental health is not good, then there's going to be repercussions for that. It's an obvious thing. We know this. This is not a mind-blowing piece of information I'm sharing here, that your physical and your mental health impact on your performance. So the second one is social connection. Isolation, loneliness is a real risk in civic life.
Yes.
Becoming an elected leader can really change how you socialize. We have digital safety. So here we're referring to your online presence. And we know that bullying, trolling, and abuse is absolutely a reality for elected leaders. And that does have really significant consequences for your mental well-being and performance. Number 4 is the technical know-how. So actually knowing how to do your job. We hear time and time again from counsellors that we're working with that the learning curve is so steep when they step into an elected leadership role for the first time or even the second time. No one likes feeling out of their depth. No one wants to give away that they might not fully understand their roles and responsibilities or how it works. So that's definitely been something that we have come across in our own coaching, that's a huge source of stress for counsellors, just not understanding the technicality of the role, so the actual governance and legislation and all of that.
And I don't know if this is the case in Oz, but here, not all, but very many local level electeds just don't get any training. Their municipality, their county simply doesn't provide it.
Just in, I think it was 2016, legislation came in now that it's mandatory for new councillors to undergo training. There's specific things that they have to cover off on. And as a business, we provide that particular induction training as well. We're lucky to get the insight into what's missing from those induction training packages. And wellbeing is one of the things that we've added as a base module in our induction training because we've seen time and time again where people have come unstuck. But of course, it is governance heavy, and it has to be because people need to know what they're doing. Yeah. They're taking all their passion and their purpose, but there is the confines of leading in a group and all of the other things. So moving on, number 5, we've identified is your motivation and attitude. This is looking at the quality of your thoughts, being aware of unhelpful thought patterns, whether you've got a declining attitude towards your role. So looking at, if you're ruminating, if you're becoming rigid, if you're constantly having expectations or whatever else it might be. So this one's quite a nuanced one, and this is where I love to work in this space. So number 5 being our motivation and attitude. So for example, we've had, say, maybe a counsellor has been really passionate about a decision and it has gone against them. So maybe, they were trying to get something across the line. It was voted down. So they're feeling undermotivated now. And they're starting to feel quite negative about lots of things involved in their role and the people that they're working with, etc. And so their attitude towards their role is declining.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really important piece, I think.
Super common.
Number 6 is your time and capacity. So this is what we were speaking about a second ago. It's like juggling the demands of being the elected leader with other life responsibilities and that friction that can start to occur between your civic role, your employment, because most counsellors have to remain employed because it's quite an underpaid role here in Australia, and of course their personal lives. We speak directly to time and capacity as a standalone stressor for people. Number 7 is relationships and conflict. So politics is generally a low trust and competitive working environment, but it's also dependent on the relationships you have. And it's all about relationships and building relationships with other counsellors and obviously your constituents and other stakeholders. So, as humans, if we're in conflict, that's very impactful on our mental well-being. It's a really difficult thing for us to manage. And so we do like to speak about that directly. And then number 8 is ethical action. If someone acts outside their integrity or their values, this causes really significant internal stress for us. And so again, here it's an elected body that makes a decision. It's not one single counsellor. And so if one single counsellor is feeling like the decision that the group has voted on is not ethical, it doesn't align with their deeper values, that's very stressful for the human mind and experience. So that's our 8 core elements that all lead into a counsellor's impact and performance. And so each of those elements has a mindset that we thought about, we looked at, and we wanted to connect each of these core elements of well-being with a specific mindset so that people could have a tangible way to approach it from that cognitive or that mind space. And we've developed an affirmation. So each mindset has an affirmation to support the positive bolstering of that mindset, and so that that mindset can then support an improvement in that area of your well-being.
Amazing. I want to sign up now.
Yay!
I mean, yeah, it feels deeply comprehensive, deeply applicable, deeply useful. And I'm curious about the structure of it. Are the 8 modules in a particular sequence? No, so you can complete the 8, but they can happen in any order?
The idea is for it not to be prescriptive in terms of any hierarchical or linear progress.
Okay.
It really very much we're developing a self-reflection tool for people to use to see all the possible stressors, influences that could be impacting on their performance as a counsellor. And when I'm speaking about performance as a counsellor, I'm talking about the counsellor feeling that they are doing the best job that they can do with the resources they have available to them, so that they feel like at the end of their day, their week, their term, that they have achieved to the best of their ability what they set out to achieve. Because I think that's a pretty nice definition of performance. I'm not talking about how many votes they get across the line or how many decisions go their way or whether people like them or not, if they're a popular politician. We're really speaking here to how that individual counsellor feels about the contribution that they have made and that they've contributed to the best of their ability and done the things that they needed to do to make sure that they were operating at a level that they were giving it their all.
Got it. So it's not as though if I were to complete all 8 modules of this course, I would have superhuman abilities in all of them and I would have solved every problem that's ever come up in my life. Rather, the intention is that I would now better and more fully understand the challenges that stand before me, the opportunities I have for growth or improvement, and have a clearer vision to make a conscious choice on if and where I would like to invest more time to improve my condition in 1 or 8 or anywhere in between of these elements?
Yeah, absolutely, Skippy. That's exactly what it's about. So
Love that.
it's really empowering the individual counselor to understand the external and internal influences or points of stress or stressors that they will experience in their civic duty, in their civic role. And then from identifying those, allowing them to go through that process of, well, do I want to develop skills in this area that might bolster against, my declining attitude towards my role? Do I want to start to explore a mindset that would allow me to switch out of this negative pattern that I'm starting to go into? This information is presented visually. It's like a web. There's no hierarchy or linear movement through the framework. It's literally a framework. It's a scaffolding from which people can jump off or, step down or up or out or in or whatever they want to do, but giving some really concrete ideas for people to look at. So the micro skills that come under each of the 8 elements are going to specifically help people address that element. So with digital safety, for example, we need to talk about boundaries in that. So talking to people in their digital safety about how they interact with social media and reminding counsellors that they have a choice around that. And actually they have the choice not to use social media. It's actually not necessary.
Yeah.
We've listed out a bunch of points where people can question and inquire for themselves, as well as identify specific skills that they might be lacking. In social media, it might be that a counsellor is replying to every single comment underneath a post that they've written.
Yep.
The mindset we chose for digital safety is actually a resilience mindset. I have the power to choose how I use social media and what I focus on when using it. Affirmations have science behind them, science-based evidence on the power of using affirmations. They actually change or have effect in the brain. The prefrontal cortex is actually involved. When we use affirmations, we're actually changing the way that we take on what might otherwise be considered threatening information. So by using affirmations, it actually changes the way we process a perceived threat. So being trolled or bullied online is threatening. And when we use affirmations like this one that I just read out to you, I have the power to choose how I use social media and what I focus on when using it. That actually is going to change the way your brain is perceiving these threats and bolster against it.
Yeah.
Actually give you a filter through which to receive that information. I would advise not reading the comments full stop, but sometimes it's necessary. And so sometimes we need to have the right mindset to approach that.
Yeah, I just this week I've been working with an affirmation or just a reflective statement. There's a particular guest that we hope to have on this podcast that I've been very excited about. They were kind of the beginning of my mental health journey. It would be an amazing benefit to the audience to have this person on. And the truth is, they have been directly super open, welcome, receptive, and then I get handed off to the staff, which has a different orientation to scheduling and language and communication. And I noticed that as soon as I see the staff member's email pop up, I get very panicky because I have a core belief somewhere that everyone in my life is going to leave me. And so it's like, oh, we're not going to get it. We're going to get abandoned. We're not. It turns into this whole thing in my nervous system. And so my affirmation is like, when I feel the panicky feeling, just to breathe into it, to know it's safe, and to trust that what's supposed to come will come. And it's insane how well that little moment break helps me get back to normal, and then helps me respond from an empowered place rather than a victimized place or a scarcity place, which if I were to respond from those places would actually drive the outcome that I fear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I just highlight that was something tangible for me today. Well, I love this framework. I'm so eager to see how it's received, how it will be utilized. Do you guys intend to be getting direct feedback from folks so you're learning how it's working?
We're reaching out and asking for input from counsellors. And I've had several conversations with counsellors who've so kindly given me their time to give their direct feedback on what we've put together so far. And we have absolutely tweaked and changed according to that feedback. We've also been working directly with the Apolitical Foundation and sharing our work as we go with them. And they've been so kind as to also give us some great feedback. And also from the perspective of councils themselves, so the staff working within the organisation of council. We've been so lucky to have conversations with governance managers, the CEOs, because it's a tricky area. Here in Australia, when you take on a civic role, you don't fall under any particular work conditions or award, as we call it. So our elected politicians are kind of in no man's land, so to speak. So they don't fall under eligibility for the things that you would normally expect in a workplace. Politicians here in Australia, they are in this unique space, and often they are quite underpaid for the amount of work that they put in. And so that financial security piece is something that we talk about in the framework as well. This framework is really kind of working to fill that gap, to share with people the necessary steps, not just that the individual can take, but we also have information in there for the organizations themselves so that they can dial up the protective factors and turn down the negative factors that might be at play just within those organizational structures or the way that things are communicated. So we're trying to come at it in all different ways, and we can't do it in a vacuum. We are 100% seeking, and if any of your listeners would be keen on having a conversation with me and have thoughts to reflect on, I'd be so grateful.
How are you guys getting around that there's no financial support for this work for individuals? Is everyone paying out of pocket at this point?
Individual counsellors here in Australia will have some small amount of professional development budget.
Okay.
It's not huge, and we have had some counsellors be able to use that for our services. A lot of the times, though, I will say that the council has approved that expenditure more for conflict coaching or particularly if someone's coming up against a code of conduct complaint, where it's a little more at the spicy end of things. But we have also had clients come through for our coaching around the wellbeing from that professional development budget. We offer some of our products and services directly through council. So we're actually contracted by the organizations themselves to provide support. And then, yes, we've had many counsellors self-fund to do our programs.
Yeah.
Kudos to them.
Yeah. I mean, it's an issue that we're solving for as well. And it sounds like our condition in the States is better, but only in certain places where many equivalent commissioners, city council members, state representatives, they will have a budget for professional development or an EAP or a council budget where they can allocate funds for this work. And so many do, but it's entirely up to the community itself. There's no requirement. And so very often those most in need are from communities that are economically disadvantaged and don't have that ability. And so it's something that we've been working on as well, is how to make sure that this support is available to everyone based on need, not simply those who can afford it based on the relative affluence of their communities. So I was curious about that. And that's why we started our foundation. So we have private donors that do things like help fund the podcast so we can get information to everybody, but also allow us to offer free or subsidized service to some communities. But those dollars are limited, right? There's only so many donors who get this right now in our experience. So it's interesting to hear how others are addressing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to kind of shift back into your experience. But before I do, is there anything in the sphere of delivering of mental well-being coaching to not just politicians, but public servants that you think would be important to touch on that we haven't touched on?
Remembering that we're all human, like maybe I haven't repeated that enough in the conversation today. The definition of performance is very much the individual's goals being addressed and met, and supporting them to achieve the goals that they set out for their councillor term, because that's what matters most, right? That the sustainability of our leaders, we've elected them because we need leaders, and we've elected these particular leaders because we have belief in them. And then when they get in that role, it's important to us to see them supported through that whole election cycle, so that they are working for the citizens in a really positive way. I know you have personal experience, Skippy, as being an elected leader, and I don't. But from the outside looking in, I just think that the amount of effort that I see most councillors put in, the passion that they have,
so much,
and the fact that we as citizens have elected to get them there, it is heartbreaking for me, and I know for Emma and yourself and so many other people working in this space, when we're seeing these people who have great intentions almost actively being cut down, whether it is on social media or the working conditions that they're put under. So I guess I just want to finish off by saying, this is absolutely heart-led work that we're doing.
That's
this
right.
is really meaningful for us, and we're in it because we care, and we care about the human side of politics.
And you said something that really struck a chord with me earlier, which is when you're acting outside of your integrity, it leads to stress. And in the way that we talk about and define mental health, to be mentally healthy is the state of being aligned, connected, and safe with self, others, and environment.
Beautiful.
And anything that draws us away from that, that disconnects us, that has us feeling unsafe, whether that's between our ears or in our home because of an online attack, or because of a story not enough, or because we've been doxxed and there's someone at our door, leads to the presentation of the symptoms of mental health challenge. And that starts with stress to overwhelm to anxiety, but it can go right up that path. And so we can't disconnect the humanity from the performance.
Exactly. Well said. That's it.
It's absolutely a myth, because you cannot perform at your best when you're being dehumanized, because you don't have access to those parts of your brain or your emotion that are required for making complex decisions amongst many different interest groups, which is the definition of democratic politics. You can't do it.
Correct.
Just highlight that.
Yes. Thank you for doing that so articulately. That's beautiful. Yeah. Well said.
So one of the things that you mentioned to me before this interview is the progress that you have made in, I don't want to say overcoming because it makes it sound like there's something wrong, but in working with your predispositions for people pleasing and for perfectionism.
Yeah.
And these are things that I hear all the time from public servants. So I think this will be very relatable. And I'd love to kind of wind down by talking a little bit about that experience. Doesn't have to be super long, but how did you work with that? What were some of the techniques or approaches that you've found? And after their application, or during their application, because it's likely a practice that's ongoing, how have you found that's affected your work?
Multiple ways. One thing that I started doing was saying no. Seems simple, but I'm just even getting a little breathless thinking about it. When you want to please others and you want to be doing a great job all the time, you say yes a lot, and you often say yes to the detriment of your own energy, your closer intimate relationships, your close family, friends, because you're pleasing so many people and it spreads you thin. So I started with the practice of saying no, and it was challenging, and yeah, I disappointed people. Maybe I missed a few opportunities as well through saying no. But ultimately, I feel like I'm a lot better human for saying no to certain people at certain times and to certain projects at certain times. I'm more vital, and it means the things that I do really care about get way more time and attention. So that's definitely been pivotal for me.
And when you began the practice of saying no, did you say no to everything, to certain things? How did you determine what got a no?
I started listening to my intuition more. So I started deliberately pausing. And I learned this from a coach. I mean, it's not like I didn't know the practice of pausing before answering. I mean, that's one of the things we learn in the mindfulness practice. But what she did is sort of just frame up for me that you really need to take a physical pause. So what I started practicing is taking a half step back from the person. So that gave me physical space. And I immediately dropped into how I felt in my body because, as I said, I'm very connected to my body, my intuition, and the way our brain is set up, you'll feel before you get the thought. And so I started to notice that icky feeling inside me and listening to it. And so then she gave me some great little phrases to use. So thank you for asking me that. I'll get back to you. Thank you for asking me that. I'm going to take a little more time to think about it. That's an interesting point you make. I need to think about it a little more. Or I really appreciate that. Can I look in my diary and I'll make a decision? So it seems simple, but gosh, it made a difference to me because I would be like, yeah, amazing, let's do it. Or absolutely. Or yes, I can do that. You name the time and I'll be there. And it's just giving away power and energy and time that, we don't have. I mean, when you've got multiple balls in the air, you're a civic leader, have a home life, a personal life, and you're probably working too. I mean, there's got to be a moment to pause and reflect. And so those little phrases that particular coach gave me, I started implementing them, and then I really would actually take a moment to think about it. And usually get back to them with a no if I had that icky feeling inside me.
And when you delivered the no, did you use any particular phrasing that was helpful?
I didn't apologize. So that was the second stage. Stop apologizing. And I still use that all the time.
Do you explain the reason? Is that allowed? I'm just very curious because people really have trouble with no's. And I've received no's that frustrated me. I've also received no's where I've been like, hell yeah, good for you. Like I want to say no that way, right? So there's an art to this. Other than the non-apologizing, are there any other specifics that you put into your no's?
I think acknowledging the person, thanking the person, and then I don't necessarily explain myself.
Yeah, very cool.
Because it's not really relevant. I mean, if they want an explanation, I will choose whether I'm brutally honest or I give a more discerning answer. Yeah.
At least in the beginning, maybe it still happens. If you still have that shortness of breath, if you still have that little bit of internal panic of, oh God, I'm letting someone down, I'm not going to do it, I've got FOMO, whatever it is. How do you treat yourself? What do you do to alleviate that or release that feeling in yourself?
I remind myself by saying no to that thing that I'm saying yes to so many other things.
Yes.
I'm saying yes first and foremost to myself. And that's really powerful because I think as a perfectionist, as a people pleaser, it's not about us. It's about everybody else all the time. And that's not such a great place to be operating from. To operate from a place of deep self-awareness is really powerful. And you can only do that when you start to put those boundaries in place, start to take that time to really know how you are in the world, what really matters to you, and where your skill set lies. And the more that you can say yes to the things that really mean something to you, that you are actually naturally and through learning good at, then that's a lot of yeses just in a different direction. Yeah. So I remind myself that all the time.
Amen to that. Couple quick hitters that just kind of caught my attention. Curious about. You reference humor a lot. You reference it in your bio. You talk about being a kitchen comedian. And if I'm being honest, we haven't done a lot of... No, I'm not going to ask you to do that. But we haven't been laughing a lot on this podcast. And sometimes we do. We have a little bit. But how does humor come into your work? Do you allow it to do that?
Yeah, look, I'm probably being a lot more polished on this podcast than you would get if we were catching up outside of this. And I'm just being really honest with the listeners on that. I do really value my professionalism. And so
Mhm.
I am definitely crossing my T's and dotting my I's on this podcast. And I'm intentionally showing up like that. I'm 100% being authentic in my answers. But, if we were to hang out outside of the podcast, I love to laugh at myself. I love to find the humor in all things because I think it is an absolutely fantastic antidote for the stress and the big things that are happening in our world, which we can't ignore and do impact and play on my mind. So yeah, I love to laugh, and I do have a pretty sometimes just a bit more of a barroom humor than maybe what I'm going to bring to the podcast today.
We'll get her on again, and we'll we'll
Also,
seed it.
swearing, like well used swearing is one of my greatest delights. And in Australia, it's quite okay to swear
Oh yeah,
well.
you guys use words that we don't approve of socially here.
And I've really watched myself today.
Some of the most interesting, most well-known clients that you guys have worked with, could you share a couple? Obviously, not individual names, but I've seen some pretty impressive stuff, and I like to think that when people see that, they go, "Oh, well, I could do that too."
The best people that I've worked with are probably people that no one is ever going to know because they're individual counsellors in regional areas in Australia that have just impressed me no end with their incredible leadership.
Fair enough. And then you mentioned earlier that you are starting organizationally to get braver, and I wonder what was the insecure voice?
For me, I have no political experience except for having personal interest in politics and other social issues. So I guess moving from a corporate coaching and also my healthcare background, I guess there was like a little bit of an imposter syndrome. Who am I to speak about political well-being? I feel like I'm over that now. I feel like we're talking about humans, and I'm well qualified to talk about humans. And so that was a big part. What am I doing? I'm trying to get more vocal about my passion for this on platforms, like LinkedIn and those kind of places. Speaking to you today was a huge thing where I had to go, yep, I can do this.
You sure can. You did.
But yay. Emma and I are speaking next year at a local government conference here in Australia, which we're really excited about. And we've just been reaching out left, right, and center to anyone who will listen to us to speak about this. So, yeah, that's how I'm getting braver. Also, putting this framework out into the world. Like, it is a lot of hours behind the scenes. Emma and I working away, bringing our minds together. And we did a soft launch of it at a Wellbeing webinar where we launched this framework, just a super soft launch. And so we had an audience there, mostly of the staff within the council organizations, so the CEOs or the general managers. And so that was a big deal because there is a tension point there between councillors and council staff, the people who work within the organization and the elected body. So yeah, that was interesting how that was received, and I feel it was received positively. And I also feel that I'm excited to get braver to keep having this conversation with people within the organizations. I think sometimes it's my natural place to speak to the individual counselors, the individual person, but to explain it to others and for others who might have influence over a counselor's well-being, that's a delicate conversation.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I am so glad and grateful that you guys are getting out there more and more, that you are introducing this framework, that you're raising awareness, that you're holding events. This is the work that it will take, and the world will be better for what you are doing. So I just want to offer a genuine, heartfelt thank you for that. And if people want to return the favor and reach out to you or find you or learn more about you and Locale Learning and all that you're doing in the framework, where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to connect on LinkedIn. My handle is Anna Miley Coaching. And that's the same on Instagram. On our website, which is www.locale learning, which is LOCALE learning, learning.com.au. We do have some free mindfulness recordings that your listeners could access if they would so like to. They're set up specifically to take 5 minutes in a busy day in the life of a civic leader. So please feel free to jump in and access those recordings as well, and a bunch of other free resources that we have there for people as well.
Amazing. And final question, same for every guest, which is, our audience are the proverbial humans in the arena, as you know very well. And so if you could leave them with just one thing, one quote, one link, one program, one idea, one thought, one anything that would best resource them to be a vector, personal vector for healing our politics, what would it be?
I would say remind yourself every day of your purpose. If you can get up and you can have that sticky note on the mirror or wherever it works for you to remind yourself of your purpose, to remind yourself why you're here and putting in the effort that you're putting in, I think that would be just incredibly powerful and really up-level the general energy and culture of our politics.
Beautiful place to end. Anna Miley, Locale Learning, thank you so much for your time today from the other side of the world. Bless the internet. And thank you for what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Skippy, for having me. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to put what you've heard here today into practice, sign up for our newsletter, The Leader's Handbook, where each month you'll receive just one email with a curated selection of the most useful tools and practices discussed on this podcast today and over the course of the last month, delivered in simple how-to worksheets, videos, and audio guides, so you and your teams can try and test these out in your own life and see what best serves you. And lastly, if you want to be a vector for healing our politics, if you want to do your part, take out your phone right now and share this podcast with 5 colleagues you care about. Send a simple text, drop a line, and leave the ball in their court. Because the truth is, the more those around you do their work, the better it will show up in your life, in your community, and in your world. Have a beautiful day. The Healing Our Politics podcast is brought to you by the Elected Leaders Collective, the first leading and most highly recognized name in mental health, well-being, and performance coaching for elected leaders and public servants, designed specifically for you. Now, don't be fooled by the name. The Elected Leaders Collective is not just for elected leaders. It is for all public servants, staffers, volunteers, government, nonprofit, whole organizations. This is for you. If you are filled with passion for improving your community and world, but are tired, as I am, of the anger, stress, and vitriol, if you find yourself banging your head against that same wall, struggling with the incoming criticism and threats, arguing with colleagues who are supposed to be on your team, and questioning if it's even worth it anymore, then the Elected Leaders Collective programming is specifically for you. With the Elected Leaders Collective, you will learn to become a hashtag political healer, building the authentic, unshakable confidence and courage to stay true to yourself through the anger and pressure, while cultivating the open, empathetic mind to meet others with the curiosity, compassion, and kindness necessary to respond to threats, improve challenging relationships, de-escalate conflict, and bring people in your community together to solve real problems and get shit done. You'll reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm and become a more effective leader while having time for your family, yourself, your health, and your wealth, sleeping well at night, and showing others they can too. Now that's leadership. Healing Our Politics listeners receive 10% off all Elected Leaders Collective services using the code hashtag political healer. Use it today and become one of the brave political leaders healing our politics. Use code #politicalhealer by going to www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. That's www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today.